There is a place in the state of Georgia where no criminal ever wants to go. That place is called Alto State Prison, formerly Lee Arundel in Alto, Georgia. If you come here, you surely won't make it out.
Stay tuned for Tales from the Toe.
Alto Prison. Ryan Garcia Goes 5 Rounds with a Booty Bully, Part 2. King Leonidas wasn't just feared, he was respected. He was in a leadership position with the Gangster Disciples, a powerful gang that ran much of the prison's underground operations. Cream, tobacco, weapons, cell phones, all of it flowed through his gang's hands. But more than that, he was a notorious booty bully. His gang didn't allow rainbow activities by its members, but made an exception for Leonidas due to the 6 life sentences he had from a murderous spree he went on back in his hometown that landed him in jail eternity. He also was a boxer, and stories of his exploits in the prison fights were legendary. He had never lost, not once. Ryan had heard about King Leonidas, but he never expected to cross paths with him. He had no interest in the gang politics of the prison, no desire to challenge the man who ruled it. All he wanted was to survive his sentence and make it out in one piece. But survival in Alto wasn't that simple. And soon enough, Ryan found himself on a collision course with the prison's king. It started with a warning. Ryan was in the yard, minding his own business, when an inmate approached him. He was tall and lanky, with a nervous energy that made him look out of place among the hardened criminals of Alto. His eyes darted around, as if he was afraid of being seen talking to Ryan. "Yo, champ," the inmate said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. "Word is, King Leonidas wants a piece of you." Ryan looked up from his shadow boxing workout, frowning. "Just leave me alone, bro. I don't mess with nobody." "Well, I just wanted to tell you that I overheard him say he thinks you cute and he want to hit dat. He heard about how you been knocked out too and doesn't like that because he heard you was racist. He say he want to box you to see who the best is, and if he wins, he gets to smash." Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind racing. He had been careful not to draw too much attention to himself, but in a place like Alto, that was impossible. He'd already made enemies, and now it seemed he'd made the worst one of all. "Thanks for the message, bro," Ryan muttered, trying to keep his voice steady. The inmate nodded and hurried away, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. Over the next few days, the tension in the prison became palpable. Every corner Ryan turned, he could feel the eyes on him, waiting, watching. The GDs were everywhere, and they made sure Ryan knew it. They didn't attack him outright. They didn't need to. The message was clear. King Leonidas was coming for him, and there was no escaping it. The confrontation came one fall evening in B Building. Ryan was in his bunk, trying to lose himself in a tattered book he'd found in the prison library, when he heard heavy footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw a group of gangsters standing at the entrance. There were 14 of them, all staring in his direction, eyes full of menace. And in the middle of them, towering over the rest, was King Leonidas, with a wicked, evil grin on his face. The gang had all snuck into B Building from the other side of the prison thanks to a dirty CO, whom grew up a gangster disciple and still pledged allegiance to the gang even while in uniform. The dormitory fell silent as the inmates watched the scene unfold. Ryan felt his heart rate spike, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't show fear. Not here. Not now. King Leonidas stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. He was even more imposing up close, weighing at least 250 pounds, broad-shouldered, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to bore into Ryan's soul. He wore a look of amusement, as if this was all a game to him.
"So you the champ?"
Leonidas said, his deep voice reverberating through the dormitory.
"Damn, you sexy as fuck, champ. Boy, I can't wait to get up in between them yellow cheeks."
Ryan stood slowly, his muscles tense. He kept his eyes on Leonidas, refusing to back down. "I'm not gay, big dude. I'm just trying to get through my time like everyone else."
"Is that right?"
Leonidas chuckled, but there was no humor in it.
"See? That's the problem. You've been drawing too much attention. This chain gang shit is my kingdom, and I don't like competition. You can go back there, pull out closet and let your boy play with that thing for a while. Or I can box you for the booty. If I win, you gotta go ahead and let me hit that. 12 rounds. Just you and me. No rules, no references, just hitting.
Ryan said nothing. There was nothing to say. He knew where this was headed. Leonidas took a step closer, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I'm going to give you a choice, champ," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You can go back there in that mop closet and let your boy play with that thing for a while, or..." He let the word hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Or, I can box you for the booty. If I win, you gotta go ahead and let me hit that. 12 rounds. Just you and me. No rules. No refs. Just hitting." The challenge was out in the open now, and there was no taking it back. Ryan could feel the weight of the entire dormitory's gaze on him. This was a fight he didn't want, but in prison, sometimes you didn't get to choose your battles. Ryan squared his shoulders, meeting Leonidas's gaze head-on. "When?" Leonidas grinned, a predatory smile that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine.
Right now, 4 shift change. We gotta get back to our dorm soon. Meet me in the shower area.
With that, King Leonidas turned and walked to the rear of the huge dorm, where the 10-man shower stall was located, his men following closely behind. The tension in the room lingered. Ryan hopped down off of his top bunk, the reality of what was coming sinking in as he laced up his state boots and headed to what might be the end of him. He didn't get to train or plan a strategy. This wasn't like any of his professional fights. This was a fight for survival and his virginity. Ryan stood, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't afraid of fighting. He'd done it his entire life. But this was different. This was a fight with no rules, no referee, and no guarantee that he'd walk away unscathed. The shower area was a grim, moldy-tiled room with flickering fluorescent lights that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The tiles were slick with condensation, and the air was thick with the smell of sweat and mildew. A group of inmates had already gathered, forming a makeshift ring around the room. Ryan could see the anticipation in their eyes. This was the spectacle they'd been waiting for. And there, in the center of it all, was King Leonidas. He was bare-chested, his massive frame gleaming under the harsh lights. His fists were already wrapped in workout gloves, and he stood with a calm, confident demeanor, as if he knew how this would end. Ryan stepped into the makeshift ring, his body tense but ready. This wasn't about winning or losing a title anymore. This was about doing everything in his power to prevent the beast in front of him from pulling his state-issued boxers down and shoving his BBC up in his backside in some mildewy mop closet. King Leonidas cracked his knuckles, his eyes locked on Ryan. "You ready, champ?" he taunted, his voice dripping with arrogance. Ryan didn't answer. He simply raised his fists, signaling that he was ready to fight. The crowd of inmates closed in, forming a tight circle around them. There would be no escape, no retreat. It was just him and Leonidas, and the fight that would determine his place in this brutal hierarchy. King Leonidas lunged forward, his first punch coming fast and hard. Ryan dodged, his instincts kicking in, and retaliated with a quick jab to Leonidas's ribs. The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed in the tiled room, followed by grunts and the shuffling of feet. The fight had begun, although if this was a sanctioned fight, Ryan wouldn't even be allowed to fight this heavyweight-sized opponent due to only weighing 147 pounds. They were in 2 different weight classes. Ryan's heart raced as King Leonidas advanced. The first few punches were cautious, both fighters feeling each other out. Ryan slipped a few jabs, his body moving with the fluidity of a seasoned boxer. Leonidas was slower, but his punches carried a terrifying weight behind them. Every swing that missed sent a gust of air past Ryan's head, a reminder that one solid hit could end it all. The crowd of inmates murmured in the background, their eyes glued to the fighters as they circled each other. This was a show for them, a break from the monotonous grind of prison life. But for Ryan, this was survival. The stakes were higher than any title fight he had ever been in. Leonidas threw a heavy right hook, and Ryan ducked just in time, countering with a quick left to Leonidas's ribs. It connected, and Ryan felt the satisfaction of a clean hit. But Leonidas didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a wicked grin that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. "You're fast, champ," Leonidas growled, stepping forward. "But let's see how long that lasts." Ryan didn't respond. He focused on his footwork, staying light on his feet, dodging and weaving as Leonidas pressed the attack. The bigger man's strength was undeniable, but Ryan knew he had the edge in speed and endurance. He just needed to stay out of reach and wait for the right moment to strike. But Leonidas wasn't just brute force. He was a seasoned street fighter, and he began to adapt. His punches became more calculated, cutting off Ryan's angles, forcing him into the corners of the makeshift ring. The tiled floor was slick under Ryan's feet, making it harder to maneuver. The humid air and the close quarters of the shower area only added to the tension. A hard uppercut from Leonidas clipped Ryan's chin, sending him stumbling back. The crowd roared in approval, and Ryan tasted blood in his mouth from viciously biting his tongue, wishing he had a mouth guard. He shook his head, clearing the stars from his vision, and reset his stance. He couldn't afford to let Leonidas get too close again. They continued to trade blows, each round becoming more intense than the last. Ryan's quick jabs found their mark on Leonidas's body, but the king's powerful punches began to wear him down. Ryan's ribs ached from the repeated shots, and his breathing became more labored as the fight dragged on. He was winning on technique, but the sheer force of Leonidas's punches was taking its toll. By the end of the fourth round, Ryan could feel fatigue creeping in. His muscles screamed in protest, and sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. He wiped his brow, glancing at Leonidas, who was breathing heavily but still standing strong. The man was a machine, relentless in his pursuit. Ryan took a deep breath. He had been in tough fights before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about skill or strategy. This was about survival, about digging deep and finding the will to keep going when every part of him wanted to stop. Leonidas cracked his neck, his eyes locked on Ryan. "You're good, champ," he admitted, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. "Better than I thought, but I'm still standing. How much longer can you keep dancing around?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't afford to. He was too busy calculating his next move, trying to figure out how to turn the tide in his favor. He knew he couldn't go toe-to-toe with Leonidas for much longer. He needed to find a way to end it, and fast. But before he could act, something changed in the crowd. A low murmur swept through the inmates, and Ryan noticed movement at the edges of the makeshift ring. Leonidas's men, the gangster disciples, were shifting, closing in on the action. Their presence was a silent reminder that this wasn't a fair fight. This was Leonidas's domain, and he played by his own rules. Ryan's pulse quickened as the reality of the situation hit him. Even if he managed to take down Leonidas, his men were waiting, ready to pounce. There was no walking away from this cleanly. He was in the lion's den, and the lions were circling. Leonidas noticed the shift too, and his grin widened. "You didn't think this was just between us, did you?" he taunted. "This is my kingdom, champ. You fight me, you fightin' the bros too." Ryan's mind raced as he dodged another punch. He had been so focused on the fight that he hadn't considered the bigger picture. Leonidas wasn't just the biggest threat. He was the symbol of control in this prison. Beating him wouldn't just be about winning a fight. It would be about survival in a place where power ruled everything. But Ryan wasn't about to give up. He had faced impossible odds before. He just needed to think, to plan his next move carefully. His eyes darted around the room, taking in his surroundings, looking for an opportunity, an opening. Leonidas charged at him, throwing a wild punch that Ryan narrowly avoided. He countered with a quick combination to Leonidas's midsection, making the big man grunt in pain. But before Ryan could capitalize on the hit, he felt something brush against his ankle. One of Leonidas's men had subtly kicked his foot, throwing him off balance. Ryan stumbled, and that split-second misstep was all Leonidas needed. The next punch landed squarely on Ryan's jaw, sending him crashing to the wet, tiled floor. Pain exploded in his head, and for a moment, everything went dark. The crowd erupted, cheering for their king, but Ryan wasn't done yet. He groaned, forcing himself to sit up, his vision blurry. He could feel blood trickling down his face, mixing with the sweat and grime. He tried to push himself to his feet, but his body betrayed him, his muscles refusing to cooperate. Leonidas stood over him, victorious, but Ryan could see the strain in his eyes. The fight had taken its toll on both of them, but Leonidas had the upper hand now. Ryan knew he couldn't afford to stay down, not if he wanted to survive. But as he struggled to rise, the GDs closed in, tightening the noose around him. King Leonidas raised his fist, ready to deliver the final blow. The big man loomed over Ryan, who was barely conscious and struggling to get back on his feet. The prison's makeshift ring was filled with tense silence, the crowd of inmates watching with bated breath. With a cold, calculated look, Leonidas delivered a brutal uppercut, his fist smashing into Ryan's chin with a sickening crack. The force of the blow dislocated Ryan's jaw and sent him crashing to the ground, his body crumpling in a heap on the cold, wet tiles. The crowd erupted in shouts and cheers, but Leonidas wasn't finished. He reached down and grabbed Ryan by his limp legs, roughly dragging him across the floor toward the dark, dingy mop closet at the back of the shower area. As the door slammed shut behind them, the remaining inmates exchanged knowing looks, understanding that King Leonidas was in that small utility closet, hard as a missile, with his bottle of baby oil, as he pumped in and out of the poor champ's cheeks. And the champ just lay, grimacing in pain as he was violated for over 25 minutes, until he felt a burst of gushy wet stuff spray up in him, not even able to yell in pain due to his jaw being cracked from its foundation. From that day forward, until he was able to sign up for protective custody and get transferred to a safer camp, Ryan was known as Leonidas's wifey, Ariana Grande. This story is a grim reminder that you should try your best never to break the law and get into trouble.